Mom's sick, so I came instead. A little girl walked into the CEO's office. What the millionaire did will leave you speechless. It was a Tuesday morning in Chicago. Gray skies, cold wind curling through the streets like breath from some unseen giant. Most people rushed into high-rises with coffee in hand, eyes on their phones, hearts already heavy with deadlines. But inside the gleaming marble lobby of the Barentech Tower, something was about to happen. Something so strange, so out of place that it would bring a billion-dollar empire to a standstill. Tucked beneath the weight of an oversized maintenance jacket, dragging a mop nearly as tall as herself, Ellie Rayner, just 6 years old, pushed open the glass doors and walked into the building like she belonged there. "Excuse me," she said, standing before the receptionist's desk, her voice barely louder than a whisper. "I'm here for my mom. She's sick. I came to clean instead." The receptionist blinked confused. "Sweetheart, what?" "I have her badge," Ellie said, holding up a lanyard around her neck that reached her knees. "She couldn't come today, and I really need to make sure she doesn't lose her job." Upstairs, Nathaniel Barron, the CEO himself, was in the middle of a quarterly strategy meeting when the call came through. "Sir," his assistant's voice said over the intercom, "you're going to want to see this for yourself." 2 minutes later, the double doors to his 46th floor office opened, and there she was. This tiny girl with pigtails and sneakers, scuffed from the sidewalk, gripping a rag in one hand and a spray bottle in the other. "My name's Ellie," she said matter-of-factly. "My mom's name is Justine Rayner. She works here. She's very sick today and couldn't get out of bed. But I know her job. I've watched her do it lots of times. I know which elevators stick where the carpet stains are, and that your trash can smells like onions if she doesn't empty it on Tuesdays." Nathaniel leaned back in his chair. He had sat across from senators, venture capitalists, even movie stars. But he'd never encountered anything like this. "You came here all by yourself." Ellie nodded solemnly. "I took the red line. Mom showed me the stops. I used quarters from my troll's lunchbox." "You took the subway?" he echoed, stunned. "Mom always says if you're scared, but you do it anyway, that's called being brave." Nathaniel stared at her. For a man used to thinking in graphs and forecasts, this child was entirely off script, and yet completely unforgettable. He dismissed the meeting. Yes, the one with investors, the one that had taken weeks to schedule. He cleared his entire morning. "Are you hungry?" he asked gently. Ellie shrugged. "Do you have any juice?" He opened his office mini-fridge and found a bottle of apple juice from some executive gift basket he'd ignored. She took it with both hands and whispered, "Thank you." She sat near the massive windows looking out at the skyline. Her little legs swung above the floor, and the city stretched out behind her like a kingdom she was too small to rule, but brave enough to enter. And Nathaniel couldn't look away. What was this child doing in his office, cleaning rag in hand, talking about rent jobs and subway stops? What kind of world asked this much of someone so small? Ellie didn't cry. She didn't fidget. She didn't even seem nervous. She just existed with a kind of quiet dignity that made Nathaniel forget for the first time in years about stock prices and acquisition deals. He watched her sip juice and inspect the edges of his desk like a soldier preparing for duty. "Is being the boss hard?" she asked suddenly. "Some days," he replied. She nodded. "Mom says big jobs only work when little things get done right." Her voice was tiny, but her words hit like gospel. She stood up, wiped her hands on her oversized sleeves, and reached into her backpack. "I think I should start now. Mom always says your desk is the first place she cleans. Gotta keep the big guy focused," she says. Nathaniel chuckled. "The big guy, huh?" Ellie walked up to his desk, pulled out a tissue, and began to wipe the surface with exaggerated care. She was meticulous, unskilled, sure, but her tiny fingers moved like she had purpose. No game, no play, just responsibility. And then her elbow bumped a tall glass of water. The sound of it tipping was soft, but the splash was instant. Water spread across his polished walnut desk, heading straight toward a folder containing confidential merger plans. "No," she gasped. Oh no, I didn't mean, please don't fire my mom. I was just trying to help." Nathaniel stood, grabbed a stack of napkins, and saved the folder just in time. Then he turned to her. She stood frozen, her eyes wide, tears pooling. The brave subway riding girl suddenly looked 6 again. "Hey," he said, kneeling. "It's okay, but I ruined it." "No," he said firmly. You were doing your best. That's what matters. You're not mad, she whispered. Ellie, today you've done more than most people 10 times your age. And for the record, you're now the youngest person to ever work in this office. A smile flickered across her tear-dampened face. And in that moment, Nathaniel Barron, billionaire CEO, who hadn't felt anything real in years, felt something crack open in his chest. Something warm. He watched her wipe the remaining water with careful little hands. And somehow he knew. This wasn't just a moment. It was the beginning of something far bigger than either of them could understand. Just a few miles away, in a small second-floor apartment above a bakery that always smelled like burnt croissants, Justine Rayner lay in bed, her skin pale and her breath shallow. The buzzing fluorescent light in the hallway flickered overhead, casting thin shadows into the cracked bedroom door. She stared at the ceiling, unable to sit up. Her chest ached with every inhale, her body trembling from fever. In the next room, the old heater clanged like a metal heart trying to beat through winter. Justine was only 27, but the weight on her shoulders made her feel twice that age. 5 years ago, she had been the rising star of her college's computer science program, top of her class, with job offers already trickling in from Silicon Valley startups. She had a mind for logic, a heart for innovation, and a dream to build something that mattered. Then came Sean, a guest speaker in one of her seminars. 10 years older, charming, magnetic. The kind of man who looked like he had a plan for everything. Justine had grown up cautious, but when he paid attention to her, her defenses crumbled. Fast. They dated, fell hard. He told her they'd take on the tech world together. But when the pregnancy test turned positive and her voice cracked as she told him the news, Sean just smiled awkwardly, then vanished. No calls, no texts, gone. When she turned to her parents, the fallout was worse. "You're throwing your future away," her father spat. Her mother's tears turned cold. "There are options," she whispered. Justine had already heard the baby's heartbeat. She made her choice, and they made theirs. Within a week, she was packing a duffel bag with secondhand sweaters and textbooks she'd never open again. She moved into a friend's garage for a while, waitressed during the day, mopped office floors at night, and read baby books during her lunch breaks. Every dollar went into a savings jar. Every kick from the child inside her reminded her she wasn't alone. Then came the night Ellie was born. It was snowing. The hospital room was crowded with strangers. But when the nurse placed her daughter in her arms, Justine whispered, "We're going to be okay." And for the most part, they were. Justine worked herself raw, scrubbing toilets and filing temp code gigs late at night. She memorized the entire blueprint of Barron Tech Tower, every elevator glitch, every carpet stain. She learned to carry herself like a ghost, slipping in and out after hours. The job didn't come with prestige, but it came with health insurance and a steady paycheck. And that meant Ellie could have warm clothes, vitamins, and bedtime stories. There were times they had to choose between gas money and groceries. Justine always picked groceries. She ate last, if at all. Over the years, her immune system weakened and each winter got harder. But she pushed through. Until that morning, the cough had been lingering for weeks. But she didn't have time to rest, not with the rent due next week. That morning, she collapsed on the bathroom floor. Ellie had tried to help, got her water, brought her a blanket, even told the neighbor. Justine could barely whisper, "Don't let me get fired." And Ellie had listened. Now Justine lay in bed with an IV in her arm at St. Agnes Hospital, her thoughts racing, not about herself, but about her daughter. Had she gotten on the school bus? Did she eat lunch? Was she afraid? She didn't know that her daughter had skipped school, climbed onto a train, and walked into a skyscraper to fight for her. She didn't know that the CEO of the very company she cleaned for was right now clearing his calendar to sit beside her daughter and hand her apple juice. What Justine did know was that her life had become one long fight. A fight to survive, to protect, to provide. She had given up her future, her family, her identity. But in return, she had received something else. A daughter who loved with her whole heart. A quiet knock sounded on her hospital door. It was a nurse smiling gently. "You have a visitor," she said. Justine furrowed her brow. What? Tall man, nice suit. Says he's from Barron Tech." She struggled to sit up, her heart suddenly pounding. And somewhere in the middle of her fear, her exhaustion, and her pain came a flicker of hope. Nathaniel Barron wasn't the type of man who made unannounced visits. His days were scheduled in 15-minute blocks. His suits were pressed by noon, his coffee brewed to exact temperature, and his moods measured like stock reports. Calculated, managed, predictable. But that afternoon, he stood outside room 214 of St. Agnes Hospital, clutching a get-well bag he hadn't meant to buy, wondering for the first time in years whether someone might tell him to go away. Through the narrow rectangle of the hospital door window, he saw her, Justine Rayner, lying still beneath thin white sheets, her face turned toward the window, golden brown hair tied back in a hasty bun. She looked younger than he'd expected, and somehow older too, worn down but not broken, not even close. He knocked gently. Her head turned. For a moment, confusion clouded her face. Then her brows lifted in slow recognition. She started, her voice hoarse. Nathaniel Barron, he said, stepping in, CEO of Barron Tech. Justine sat up quickly, too quickly, grimacing as she winced against her own body. Please don't get up, he said, raising a calming hand. She sank back into the bed, face flushing. I'm sorry. I didn't know she'd do something like this. Ellie, she's a very determined kid. I had no idea she'd actually go there. He smiled faintly and shook his head. You don't need to apologize. Justine blinked. I met Ellie this morning. He continued, pulling the visitor's chair beside the bed. She walked into my office like she owned the place. Told me she was there to work for you. Her hand covered her mouth. Oh my God. She brought a spray bottle and a rag, he added with a laugh. And more focused than half my boardroom. Justine let out a breath, a laugh mixed with the kind of disbelief only mothers of bold daughters understand. She always watches me. I never thought she was absorbing everything. Well, she was, Nathaniel said, and she told me about you. A little. Justine's expression shifted. Defensive, guarded. What did she say? That you're the best mom in the world. Silence filled the room, thick and intimate. Nathaniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I'd like to hear your side too, he said. Justine hesitated, but something in his voice, the absence of pity, the presence of curiosity, invited honesty. So she told him how she had once dreamed of developing software that could simplify lives, how she'd loved algorithms, puzzles, and late-night hackathons, how she'd fallen for a man who disappeared at the first sign of permanence, how she'd chosen to keep her baby even when it meant losing her family, her degree, and any safety net she once had. She spoke plainly, not with self-pity, not with drama, but with the raw cadence of someone who had lived it. I thought if I could just land one job that stuck, she said softly, we'd be okay. That cleaning job at Barron Tech, it wasn't glamorous, but it was the first time I could breathe. Nathaniel nodded slowly. And you've done it. You've kept everything going. She looked up at him. You must think I'm reckless. Letting her take the train alone like that? I never would have allowed it if I'd known. But I couldn't move this morning, and she just wanted to help. I don't think you're reckless, he said. I think you've done more with less than most people ever have to. And I think your daughter is braver than any 6-year-old should have to be. For a moment she looked at him as if he were speaking a language she hadn't heard in years. Compassion. You're the strongest person I've ever met, he added. That broke something in her. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. She turned her face slightly ashamed, brushing them away with trembling fingers. I'm sorry, she whispered. Don't be, he said gently. You've earned every one of them. She didn't reply, but the tightness in her posture softened. Nathaniel stood and placed the small bag on her tray table. Juice, a sandwich, some fuzzy socks. Ellie said you get cold feet. She laughed through her sniffles. She would. I'll be checking in again, he said as he turned to leave. Not just because I'm curious, but because I care. Justine watched him walk out the door, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel invisible. That evening, Nathaniel stood in his penthouse office staring out at the skyline, the glass cold against his fingertips. The city had never looked different before, but now something felt shifted, off axis, or perhaps finally aligned, all because of a child with pigtails and impossible courage. He didn't know where this story was going, but he knew it wasn't over. Not yet. 2 weeks later, Justine Rayner returned to work. The hospital stay had left her thinner, Her cheeks hollowed, her movement slower, but her posture was steady and her eyes, though tired, held a quiet fire. She wore the same faded blue uniform and pushed the same squeaky cart through the tiled hallways of Barentech Tower, but something about her presence felt different. She was no longer invisible, not to Nathaniel Barron anyway. The man who had once lived according to spreadsheets and PR briefings now found himself wandering off course. He began taking morning walks through hallways he hadn't seen in years. Maintenance wings, janitor closets, stairwells. He told his assistant he was checking building operations, but he wasn't fooling anyone, especially not himself. What he was really doing was searching for the flash of her hair as she bent over a sink, for the sound of her mop swishing over tile. He wasn't stalking, he wasn't hovering, he was just present, interested, invested. One rainy morning, as Justine struggled up a stairwell, carrying a sloshing bucket, the handle digging into her fingers, Nathaniel stepped in. Without a word, he took the bucket from her. She startled, almost dropping it. "Mr. Barron, I was just headed this way." He lied easily, lifting the bucket like it weighed nothing. "HVAC inspection." She arched an eyebrow, skeptical, but smiling. "Is that what CEOs do now?" His reply was a smirk. Apparently, that moment was small, barely a breath in time, but it hung between them like a whispered secret. She watched him ascend the stairs, setting the bucket down at the top landing with a casual grace that didn't match the man she thought she knew. And something inside her stirred. That afternoon, as she returned to her cart in the janitor's closet on the 17th floor, she found a clean, folded white towel resting neatly on top. On it, a yellow sticky note. "Don't forget to wipe your brow. Some of us notice the effort." She stood there in silence, towel pressed lightly to her chest. She had never received a love note before. Not like this. Not written in ink and honesty instead of charm and game. She tucked the note into the front pocket of her uniform. She didn't tell anyone, but her steps were lighter that day. The encounters remained brief, sometimes only a glance across the hallway, a shared elevator ride, a nod, and a faint smile. But each one carried a gravity that belied its length. Every time their eyes met, something passed between them, something unspoken but unmistakable. One evening, as the building emptied and the executive floor fell into silence, Justine polished the marble floor outside the CEO's suite. The lights inside were still on. Nathaniel stepped out. He froze when he saw her. She straightened. Their eyes locked. Seconds passed. Not a word was spoken. Just awareness, warmth, something fragile and potent all at once. Then she dropped her gaze. "Good evening, sir." She turned back to her mop, willing her heart to slow down. Inside the suite, Nathaniel stood behind the glass wall of his office, watching her silhouette move down the corridor. "Want de force is dansad." She didn't look back, but behind the supply closet door, she leaned against the shelving, her palm flat over her chest, breath-shaky lips tugging upward against her will. "Get a grip, Justine," she whispered, smiling despite herself. The towel he left her days before was still in her pocket. She pulled it out, wiped her brow with it, like a ritual, and let the silence hold her. That weekend, Justine took Ellie to the park. It was late autumn. The leaves crunched beneath their feet. Ellie tugged her mother's hand, pulling her toward the swings. "Do you like Mr. Barron?" she asked out of nowhere. Justine blinked. "Why do you ask?" "Because," Ellie said, as if it were obvious, "he looks at you like I look at cake." Justine laughed out loud, a full sound she hadn't made in years. Back at Barentech, Nathaniel sat alone in his office, staring at the folded note Justine had left on his desk this time. It said, "Big jobs only work when little things get done right. Thank you for seeing mine. Jay." He didn't know where this was going, but every day, every small moment made him more certain of one thing. He didn't want it to end. Not now, not ever. The late November wind had teeth that year, slicing between the buildings of downtown Chicago and rattling even the steadiest nerves. For Justine Rayner, the cold outside was nothing compared to the chill that crept through her bones when she saw Sean Taylor leaning casually against the marble reception desk in the Barentech lobby. He hadn't changed much. Same cocky smile, same perfectly calculated stubble, same leather jacket that probably cost more than her monthly rent. She froze mid-step, Ellie's hand in hers. The little girl was bouncing along beside her, chatting about the art projects she made at school. but her voice faded into a blur as Justine stared at the man who had once shattered her life without so much as an apology. "Hey, stranger," he said, pushing off the desk. Justine stiffened. "What are you doing here?" "I heard you work here," he said, flashing that crooked grin that used to make her knees weak, back when she didn't know better. "I thought I'd stop by. Maybe talk." She narrowed her eyes. "Talk about what?" He glanced down at Ellie, then back at her. "About her. About how I want to be part of her life." Justine's heart thudded. "You want what?" she said, voice tightening. "I think I deserve a chance," Sean said smoothly. "A real chance. Maybe even a little help getting started." There it was. The real reason. He didn't care about Ellie. He never had. This wasn't about fatherhood. It was about leverage. I also heard, he continued, leaning in slightly, that you've got a pretty cozy thing going on with the CEO. Nathaniel Barron. Right guy's got money. Influence. I figure if he's taking a shine to you, maybe you've got something to offer. Justine's blood ran cold. "Are you blackmailing me?" Sean shrugged, unbothered. "I'm just saying, maybe there's something in this for everyone. Or maybe, if certain rumors started floating around, things could get complicated." She didn't respond. She turned sharply, took Ellie's hand, and walked away as fast as she could without drawing attention. But inside she was trembling. It was too late. By the end of the week, whispers had begun to circulate in the Baron Tech hallways. "Did you hear about the janitor and the CEO? They say he's been visiting her cleaning station every night. Apparently he canceled an entire board meeting because of her." None of it was true. And yet, the narrative took on a life of its own. In a company where perception was currency and image equaled power, the rumors became more dangerous than reality. Nathaniel's board of directors called an emergency session. "You're compromising your objectivity," one member warned. "This woman is a liability," another snapped. "There are murmurs in the media," said the chairman grimly. "You need to end this association immediately." Nathaniel sat in silence as the voices rose around him. Fingers steepled, jaw clenched. When they finally quieted, he stood, letting his words slice through the tension like a blade. "Let me make something very clear," he said, voice calm but resonant. "If Justine Rayner is being targeted, disrespected, or removed from this company because of her association with me, then I will be the first to leave." The room fell into stunned silence. "She is not a liability," he continued. "She is a mother, one of the hardest working people in this entire building. And more importantly, she is the woman I love." A gasp. No one challenged him, not a single person. Word of the meeting spread within hours. But by then, Justine was already packing her things. Her heart pounded as she emptied her locker in the janitor's closet. She had made peace with losing everything before, but this time it felt different. "This job, this company, you've built it from the ground up," she said when Nathaniel found her. "I don't want to be the reason you lose it." He stepped forward, gently taking her hands. "You are not the reason," he said. "You are the anchor. The only thing in my life that's made me feel like a person instead of a position." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "You stood up for me?" she whispered. He smiled softly. "You stood up for Ellie, for everything. You didn't think anyone noticed, but I did. And now, so does everyone else." For the first time, she believed it. Fully. Completely. Still, Nathaniel knew Sean wasn't done. Not yet. So he made a quiet phone call. A week later, Justine sat in a downtown law office across from one of the most respected family attorneys in the state. A woman known for defending single mothers and dismantling manipulative men in court. They built the case with meticulous care, 5 years of solo parenting job, histories, medical records, financial statements, Ellie's school reports. They assembled a fortress made not of wealth, but of truth. Sean showed up to one hearing smug and smirking, until he saw Nathaniel Barron sitting in the back row, silent, composed, and unblinking. That smirk didn't survive the afternoon. 3 days later, Sean officially withdrew his petition for custody. He never contacted Justine again, and for the first time in 6 years, she could breathe, truly deeply breathe, because the storm had passed, and the sky, finally, was beginning to clear. The day started like any other. The janitor's closet on the 17th floor was still cluttered, the mop bucket still squeaked, and Justine Rayner still wore her worn-out blue uniform. But something had changed. Not in the building. In her, she wasn't invisible anymore. Her court victory had been quiet, not front-page news, but it had lit a fuse inside her, one fueled by dignity and something she hadn't felt in a long time possibility. So, when Nathaniel Barron approached her with a proposal that afternoon, she thought it was a joke. "I want to offer you a new position," he said, casually walking beside her as she wheeled her supply cart down the hallway. "Something a bit more fitting." She looked up, eyebrows raised. "What, like a better mop?" He smiled. "How does technical advisor for internal systems sound?" She stopped walking. The cart bumped her heel. "Nathaniel," she said slowly, "I haven't written a line of code in 6 years. I don't even know what version of Java we're on." "You don't need to know that," yet he replied. "You just need to know people and systems, and you do." Her laugh was dry. "The only system I know is which floors get the worst coffee stains." "That's exactly why I need you," he said. "You see what nobody else does." The following Monday, Justine walked into her first official meeting, not with a mop, but with a laptop. Her new office was small but sunlit, tucked beside the IT department with a window view of the river, a desk with her name on it, a fresh notepad, a staff ID badge with her picture. Nathaniel had set up a mentorship plan with the senior engineering team. She was given access to online courses, a new MacBook, and, perhaps most importantly, his full, unwavering support. She started slow, asked questions, listened more than she spoke. But within 3 weeks, Justine had drafted a proposal for a user-friendly maintenance reporting platform, one that cut down paperwork, reduced miscommunications, and allowed janitorial staff to log service issues in real time using a simple tablet app. The IT team was stunned. Executives took notice because no one had ever asked the cleaning crew what they needed before. Justine did. She had walked the halls, pushed the carts, memorized the broken faucets and the buzz of dying lights. She knew the way people ignored night shift employees, how complicated the old systems were for non-tech staff. She knew because she had been them. And now she was changing it all from the inside. The beta launch was a success. Response times to maintenance requests dropped by 53% in the first month. Team morale lifted. Departments started calling her by name, not to complain, but to ask for advice. Janitors, assistants, security guards, people who'd spent years on the building's margins suddenly felt seen, all because one of their own had found her way to the center. One day, Justine walked into the break room and found a crowd around a glowing screen. On it was the company's intranet homepage featuring an article, "Former Janitor Leads Tech Overhaul at Barron Tech." Her face, her story, her name. A few people clapped. One assistant offered a fist bump. Justine turned bright red and mumbled something about still figuring it out, then ducked out as fast as she could. But in the hallway she paused, because Ellie was there, waiting as she often did after preschool, sketchbook in hand and a chocolate milk from the front desk vending machine. "Mom," she squealed, waving a new drawing. "Look, it's you in your new office." The stick figure wore glasses and held a laptop. Above her head, "My mom is a boss." Justine knelt, smiling through sudden tears. "That's really good, kiddo. Mr. Nathaniel said you're changing everything," Ellie said proudly. "I told him you always do that." Justine kissed her forehead. He's not wrong. That night, Nathaniel found her on the rooftop terrace alone under the city lights. She stood by the railing, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the skyline. "I saw the article," she said before he spoke. "Too much." She glanced sideways at him. "A little." He chuckled. "I can have it pulled." "No, leave it," she said quietly. "Let people see what someone like me can do." He stepped beside her. "You've already changed the place, Justine." She looked up. "I'm not done." He smiled. And he believed her. Because this wasn't a Cinderella story. There was no fairy godmother, no magic wand, just a woman who had climbed from the shadows and was now reimagining the whole castle. Blueprint by blueprint, hallway by hallway, one overlooked detail at a time. And she wasn't done building, not by a long shot. It didn't happen with a grand announcement or sweeping gestures. There was no confetti, no viral moment. But slowly, beautifully, they became a family. Justine, Ellie, and Nathaniel. It started with quiet dinners, not dates. Just 3 people sharing takeout containers on the couch of Nathaniel's corner office. Ellie nestled between them, dipping fries into ketchup, while explaining the plot of her favorite cartoon with wild hand gestures. It continued with weekend walks along Lake Michigan, with Ellie insisting on holding both their hands at once, with Nathaniel learning how to braid her hair, poorly at first, better with practice. The first time she called him Mr. Nathaniel, he grinned. The second time she dropped the Mr. and just called him Nathaniel, he felt something flicker in his chest. But the third time, the night she whispered Dad without thinking, he froze. It happened on a Tuesday. Justine had stayed late to finalize the design layout for the platform's final rollout. Ellie had fallen asleep on the office couch, her face smushed against a pillow Nathaniel had placed there earlier. As he tucked a blanket over her small body, she stirred and mumbled, "Thanks, Dad." Justine turned so fast her chair scraped the floor. Nathaniel's eyes locked with hers, shining, but not shocked. He didn't correct her. He only smiled, then whispered, "I'd be honored." Justine's heart cracked open. Because that word, Dad, wasn't just a title. It was trust. It was earned. In the weeks that followed, their lives blended with seamless warmth. Mornings began with shared coffee in the office cafe. Justine with her hazelnut, Nathaniel with his black and unflinching, Ellie with chocolate milk and extra whipped cream. Afternoons brought Ellie's drawings taped on whiteboards during team meetings, stick figures with big glasses labeled Mom, and others in suits labeled Boss Man Nate. Evenings became their sacred space. Stories on the couch, soft music in the background, laughter spilling through their apartment windows. Nathaniel, who had once moved through life with guarded efficiency, found himself learning things no spreadsheet could ever teach, like the joy of being wrapped in a spontaneous hug from a 6-year-old, or the sound of Justine's laugh when she finally let go of her exhaustion. She was still herself, sharp-driven independent. She didn't shrink into their relationship. She grew within it. And Nathaniel, he didn't rescue her. She didn't need rescuing. What he did was show up, every single day, not as a CEO, but as a man learning how to build something real. They kept it quiet, not hidden, just sacred. The company had accepted her, respected her. But this was for them. So they didn't post selfies or plan elaborate gestures. They simply lived. On Sunday mornings, they played cards in pajamas. On Wednesday nights, Nathaniel read Ellie's school essays out loud with the seriousness of a news anchor, even the one about why she believed pancakes should be their own food group. There was no blueprint for it, no quarterly goal, but somehow it worked. One evening, Justine found a folded note in her laptop bag. Nathaniel's handwriting clipped and neat. "It's strange. I used to think the corner office was everything. Now I know, home is wherever you two are." At a company-wide luncheon in the spring, Ellie sat in Nathaniel's lap, while Justine gave a brief speech about her team's latest update. When it was over, someone from HR whispered, "That kid's going to end up running this place one day." To which Nathaniel replied, "I hope so." Later that night, after Ellie had gone to bed, Justine stood by the window of their apartment, arms folded, gaze distant. He walked up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. "You okay?" he asked. "I keep waiting to wake up," she said. "You're not dreaming." She turned to him, eyes glassy. "I just don't know how we got here." He kissed her forehead. "We walked together, because that's what family is sometimes. Not the people you're born to, but the ones you choose, the ones who see you when you're invisible, the ones who say I've got you and mean it." It was a Saturday in May. The air was soft, warm-scented faintly with lilacs. In the heart of Lincoln Park, just outside the buzz of downtown Chicago, families spread picnic blankets across sunlit grass. Kids flew kites that dipped and danced in the breeze, and someone nearby strummed a guitar lazily under a tree. Justine thought they were just there for lunch. Nathaniel had packed the basket himself. He insisted, and included her favorite things. Ellie was already chasing butterflies barefoot, her sundress fluttering behind her like a cape. They found a quiet patch beneath a large oak tree, its limbs wide and sheltering. As Justine unpacked sandwiches and fruit, she turned and caught Nathaniel looking at her, not just admiring, but as if he were memorizing, what she asked with a smirk biting into an apple slice. He reached into the basket again, pulling out something she hadn't seen him pack, a small square velvet box. Justine's hands froze. Nathaniel, he didn't kneel. He didn't need to. Instead, he sat down beside her, took her hand gently, and placed the box in her palm. When she opened it, her breath caught. Inside was a gold ring, simple, elegant, with a single deep blue sapphire that shimmered like twilight. I don't need cameras, he said softly, or a stage, or a crowd. His voice wavered, but only slightly. I just need you, and Ellie, and this life we've already started, the quiet dinners, the shared glances, the way you've taught me how to feel again. That's the only ceremony I care about. Then he asked the question, not loud, but clear and filled with every ounce of sincerity in his being. Will you marry me, Justine? Tears welled instantly. She tried to speak, but only managed a nod at first. Yes, she whispered, her voice cracking. Yes, of course I will. Ellie, having returned just in time to see the box, let out a gasp that could have shaken birds from the trees. Mommy, are you crying? Justine laughed through her tears. Happy tears, baby. Nathaniel opened his arms and Ellie flung herself between them, giggling. What do you think, sweetheart? He asked, lifting her into his lap. Should we make it official? Ellie nodded so hard her pigtails bounced. Mommy always says superheroes don't wear capes, she declared, hugging them both. But you're our superhero. Right. Justine looked up at him, eyes shimmering. He always has been, she said. Nathaniel kissed her forehead, then Ellie's. I love you both, he said, voice tight with emotion, more than anything I've ever built, bought, or dreamed of. Ellie squeezed their hands tightly. Then can we go home now? Together? Nathaniel nodded. Yes, always. That evening, the three of them sat together on the small balcony of their apartment, the city glowing around them like a galaxy of fireflies. Justine sipped tea. Ellie sat cross-legged with a puzzle in her lap, humming. Nathaniel leaned on the railing, watching them, heart full. One is Taurus. Yeah, what'll be done? And in a rare voiceover that would later close the YouTube film, he reflected. A little girl in a janitor's uniform walked into my office one morning and brought with her the family I never knew I needed. They didn't need saving. I did. And in choosing love over power presence over pride, I finally found what I'd been searching for all along. Home. In a world obsessed with power, image, and speed, this story reminds us that sometimes everything that truly matters walks in quietly, wearing scuffed sneakers and carrying a spray bottle. Justine Rayner was never supposed to be seen. She scrubbed floors long after the lights went out. She raised her daughter in silence, in sacrifice, in shadows. Yet through every hardship, she never lost her strength, only hid it in plain sight. And Ellie, sweet, brave Ellie, with her lunchbox full of quarters and a heart too big for her tiny frame, became the spark, the catalyst, the quiet storm that brought the whole world to a halt, starting with one man who had everything and yet somehow nothing real. Nathaniel Barron, the stoic CEO with his manicured days and mirrored skyline, didn't fall in love with a fantasy. He fell for truth, for courage, for a woman who taught him that empathy is stronger than ego, and that building something lasting isn't done in boardrooms, but in the small, consistent acts of care. Together, the three of them rewrote what family meant, not just through romance, but through resilience. Not with declarations, but with presence. It wasn't a perfect story. There were stumbles, threats, rumors, and ghosts of the past. But through it all, they chose each other, day after day. Quietly, completely, and in doing so, they proved something powerful. That home isn't a place, it's people. That strength wears many faces. A janitor's hands, a child's bravery, a CEO's vulnerability. And that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories begin with the simplest words. Mom's sick, so I came instead. Thank you for being part of this journey. If this story stirred something in your heart, we invite you to like, subscribe, and join our growing community of everyday miracles. Because here we don't just tell stories. We remember what it means to feel,